This is The Healthy Healer, where true voice is your medicine. This is where we help doctors and other healers navigate through the challenging times by learning from the best minds in the healing industry. Laugh, cry, and be surprised. It's entertainment, education, and inspiration so you can continue to be the unique and amazing healer you were destined to be. Welcome to humanity. Welcome to The Healthy Healer with Dr. Fred.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the next amazing episode of The Healthy Healer. Today, we have an amazing guest as well, so I'm super excited to introduce you to Dr. Ken Pelletier. As I've already stated in the intro, Ken has a long and very impressive bio that we've addressed some aspects of in the intro that I'm sure we're going to be able to tap on just by being in the conversation with him. But, suffice it to say that Ken's been around the block a little bit and made his own connections with what it is to be human and what it really means to create a life that actually works. So there's an idea here about, we often lean on our DNA, Ken, right? Like we lean on thinking that the DNA actually dictates the life that's in front of us. But I think you beg to differ with that particular thought, that there's a whole opportunity to create a life here that has very little to do with the actual nucleic acids that were laid down in our DNA or in the double-stranded aspect of what we were born with, and that we have an opportunity to create a life that's entirely different and left to us to actually design and live into. At least that's a little bit that I get from what I've learned from you to this point. So before we get too far along those lines and I put my foot in my mouth, maybe say something that isn't exactly aligned with you, let me introduce you to our listenership and to this conversation. Again, welcome, and it's just a pleasure to have you here with me, Dr. Ken Pelletier. Yeah?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Just to you. Okay, so Ken, let's get started with this question. I think you knew this was coming. You're familiar with the show. We have the 9-letter question I'm going to drop in your lap, and that is really, Ken Pelletier, who are you?
Let's see. I'm an avid open ocean sailor. Have been since 5 years old. And I'm actually heading to Antarctica and to Easter Island in about 2 weeks on a National Geographic trip, which I really enjoy. I live in Carmel by the Sea, just south of San Francisco. Do a lot of sailing here, a lot of marine aquatic life in the bay, and my whole career has been spent in academia, UCSF, and then 12 years at Stanford. Now back at UCSF, and that's pretty much it.
Interesting. So tell us a little bit about what this is an interesting interface, of course. Your capacity to work and live and be on the water, and not only on the water, but in the wind, and not only in the wind, but to be in the open air and anywhere that the globe has an offer for you. And yes, to be there with the marine life and to what it really means to be out there in the waterland, in the ocean land, and how that interfaces with you being at such a central academic institution. One would think that there's an interface, maybe an agitated, irritated interface between like UCSF and Stanford and the marine, the marine aspect of life. But it seems that you have integrated these things and made them all part of who Ken Pelletier is. So tell us a little bit about how they work together. What is the waveform that has, your marine lifestyle interface with like you call a lifelong commitment to academia, especially in these two very, very high profile institutions?
I've never been asked this question before. I
didn't promise you that I would ask you questions that you've been asked before. So.
I could count on that. I've been a sailor since 5 years old, so that's my life thread, and out of that has grown really a deep affinity with marine mammals. I really intended to be a marine biologist, and then got shunted off into neurophysiology and studies of pain and adept meditators, and it kind of went off on an interesting tangent, if you will, to my life direction, but I've always had an affinity. So I'm on the board of the Wild Dolphin Project, which is the longest research engagement between people and wild dolphins in the Caribbean. It's a 40-year-old program. Uh, and also, I've been diving with the humpback whales in Hawaii and in Santo Domingo. So I really feel very at home in the ocean, and its connection to my work is that all of us need to unwind. We all need a stress management approach. We all need to stay centered. We need to be who we are. We need to be real. And to me, when I'm on a sailboat and the wind is perfect and the keel is balanced, um, is a time when I feel totally at ease, at peace, at one. There's no other way to describe it. For me, it's my meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And that has driven everything about my research, which is looking at what is the power within each individual that makes us unique, that makes us able to tolerate stress and strain, that creates health or illness, again, at our discretion, by and large, by the choices we make literally minute by minute, day by day.
That is an interesting concept, as you know, and hopefully that's one of the reasons you just paused. This idea that health and illness are, by and large, by discretion. Like there's some sort of voluntary, or maybe not, maybe voluntary isn't quite the word, but that we have access to delivering our own health and illness as a function of who we're being. Is this what you're suggesting?
Yes, you actually have articulated it better than I have. When you say genetics, 20 years ago, we mapped the human genome and we thought that's it. We know the dictionary, we know the alphabet, we've got the whole Library of Congress. And in reality, it was incomplete. And it wasn't until about 4 months ago that some of what was called the dark DNA, or the gaps in the DNA mapping, actually have begun to arise, and realize that these are incredibly important vectors. They kind of determine whether a genetic predisposition is expressed or suppressed. And that predisposition is dependent on our choices. So less than 5 to 8% of what we see as adult disease is called monogenic or fully penetrant genetic predispositions. The rest, 92 to 95% of who we are, what we experience as adults, are based on what we do that has genes expressed or suppressed in the course of our lifetime, through stress, through diet, through environmental exposures, through support with other people, through pharmacology. So much of what we ultimately experience as adults is of our own creation. For better or for worse, some people embrace that idea, other people find it frightening. But that is the reality. And again, the whole field of epigenetics, which began really in earnest maybe only 15 years ago, it's a fairly new field, has been very carefully exploring specific interactions between specific lifestyle choices, environmental impact, pharmacology, and what happens with our genetic code. So what I've used as a cliche, if you will, is we're not victims of our genes, we're masters of our fate. And that's really true.
Okay, so there's a question that is bubbling over here, and I'm hoping that I can articulate it at least close to what my thought process is to drop it into your lap. So this is an extraordinary change of a locus of control. The locus of control is shifting in how you look at how the world is unfolding for us as human beings, or really as all life forms. But in this case, let's stay with humans for now.
Yes.
The idea being that choice, or sovereignty, or agency, which is the implication is outside of the genetic profile, that the choices I'm making are not directly determined by the DNA, but in fact, the choices live outside as a governing body in some ways, or as at least a massive influence to the expression or non-expression of DNA, dictated or DNA driven manifestations of illness or health, and that it is me in my soul or in my choice that is actually designing which of these things trip into being present or non-present at any given moment. Is it what you're suggesting? Am I close to on target here?
You're, again, very articulate, and I totally agree with that. And my first inkling of this in kind of combining research and general medical care was in the mid-70s. And in the 70s, if you remember, the neurophysiology textbooks talked about an autonomic and a voluntary nervous system, that the two would never meet, and et cetera, et cetera. And something about that didn't make sense to me, because if you hold your eyes open, you can do that for a while voluntarily, but when your eye desaturates, you'll blink. It's involuntary. Same with breathing. You can halt your breathing for a few minutes, and then you desaturate, and then you need to reflexively breathe. So I did a study in the early 70s, which was really quite radical. I studied a group of adept meditators who were capable of controlling bleeding, pain, and infection. And they would skewer themselves with sharpened bicycle spokes and knitting needles and do things that you could not get approved through human subjects if your life depended on it these days, but it was the 70s. And what I learned from that is when they were meditating, they looked like they were on a beach. They responded to pain. They bled normally. Everything was totally normal about them, except for the fact when they were meditating, when their mind was at ease, when their mind was focused and centered, they looked like they were on a beach. No accelerated heart rate, no change in blood chemistry, no change in blood pressure. So that to me was the first inkling that the biology was not dictating their response. And that made me wonder, what other things about our biology are we dictating in a good or bad way, or not paying attention to at our great peril? And that journey, that question, has driven me ever since. In many ways, the epigenetic studies, I was a New York Times reviewer, said, oh, I get it. Epigenetics is Mind is Healer, Mind is Slayer, which was my book in the 70s. Fast forwarded 50 years on a biological cellular level, because Mind is Healer was on the organ level and nervous system level. And this is really getting it down to the fact that, yes, we affect our organs and our central nervous system and our moods and who we become, but it's happening at the cellular level, which to me is fascinating.
So what I totally understand that, at least as much as I can right now, enough to have this question sit, which is, where in the system does this soul of ours, this choice maker, this decision maker, this thing that is the choreographer or the authority or the author of our life, where in the world does this thing reside that has itself be separate in such a way to be able to contribute, or in fact dictate the response of our biology? Like when I decide to become cause of my life, given what you're talking about, and not let biology default into creating all this pain and suffering and blood pressure changes and all those things. If I learn that I in fact can choreograph as the captain of my ship exactly how things are going, where is that actually residing that has it be? Like, where is this mind, this soul, this choice maker, this decision maker of mine? Where does it live that has it have access to the joystick and steering wheel of my life?
Well, that's a perpetual question. As you know, I wish I had even a semblance of an answer. One of the meditators we studied said we have an illusion that we're a body having a spiritual experience, but in fact, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true. I mean, mind does not reside in the brain. We know that for a certainty. And there's been excellent studies called Pribram and others that have really challenged the reductionistic model of brain as physiology and chemistry. We know that does not reside in the physical brain. We know it resides after death. We know through, there are, when the organs are transplanted, that memories from the person who gave the organ are alive in the person who receives the organ. Studies that are, to me, that's an astounding finding. So somehow the answer to where it resides is less important is the fact that it does reside. And in each of us, like when you say I, when I say I, there's a sense deep inside of you of what that is. It's a feeling. You can't define it. It's not neurophysiological. It's not biochemical, but there's a feeling that you have an identity, and that identity makes choices, big and small. And it's that sense of efficacy, that sense of empowerment, locus of control, as you mentioned earlier. That's what I mean by consciousness.
Mm. Now, my imagination. Go ahead, Ken. I missed that.
Just one last thought is, there's a healthy way to have a disease. So people say, oh, well, epigenetics, but someone gets Parkinson's when they're 70 or Alzheimer's when they're as young as 50. The point is yes, that's true. And yes, those do have strong genetic predispositions. And no, you didn't do anything to make it happen or to deserve it. That's not even the question. But there's a healthy way to have a disease. And even when a person does have a severe disability, there are ways to function at a very high level that is the property of consciousness, that the property of will, of efficacy.
So talk to us a little bit about this healthy way to have a disease. Let's say I somehow get diagnosed with senile dementia, Alzheimer's type at 50 years old, or I have Parkinson's at 70 years old. I have some sort of thing that I declare or that someone declares is actually going on in my central brain or somewhere in my limbic system or somewhere that has me have, tremors and cognitive changes and all the things that might be associated with these disorders that I did not earn, that I did not get necessarily by acting wrong or right at any given time or being spiritual or not spiritual enough. These are things that actually did have a strong genetic disposition or predisposition that I was unfortunate enough, let's say, to have expressed in this lifetime. What is a healthy way to take on that disease? What should I know? What is a way to actually own that disease and have it be part of who I am without being, despairing and ripping at my every thread of being?
Well, first step is recognizing you're not the disease. You're not the disability. You're more than that. That's the very, very first step. And then you see around you, inspiring examples. The whole Special Olympics are inspiring examples of people who have disability who overcome them. And Michael J. Fox with Parkinson's, he's been an astounding role model for people with a deadly disease. There are studies now going on that people can reverse or halt or reverse Alzheimer's with early interventions and combinations of pharmacology. And so again, all of us are going to end up with some dreaded disease that's going to end our life. There's no question about that. But you can spend the time you have depressed, withdrawn, addicted to medications, going from, medication to medication in great futility, as you've talked about in your programs, or you can spend it functioning at the highest possible level, being creative, being engaged, living out every minute you have, tying up loose ends in your life. There's 1,000 ways to have a good life. When you recognize you're not your disability, you're not even your body, you're a whole life, and that whole life still can be expressed.
Yeah, beautifully said. You're not your disability, and you're not even your body. The really, really important points here. This idea that, being a spiritual being, what did you say? Being a spiritual being, having a
physical experience.
A physical experience, exactly. Yeah. It's really there's something about that I'm getting, and really my whole day today seems like it's defined on this. It's like I woke up with this level of agitation and somewhat restless irritability today. And the group that I was just in that had us be late in starting today was all based on this as well. So there's something about the trigger point or this notion of a good life being delivered by me recognizing that I am at the helm of my ship, that I am much more at the capacity of what this is to be me, over and above a body, over and above the disease, over and above the clot of ailments that I might have at any given time. like that I get to be me at a grand scale. And the more that I realize that I am at the helm of the joystick and steering wheels of my life, the more I then take on the capacity to have not only a worthwhile life, but a prosperous and a contributing life to all of humanity, leaving myself as someone who came with a divine inspiration, perhaps, with some level of providence that was here to make a positive difference in the world and to receive the beauty of life. So in both directions, and it have those things all be in consort with each other, so that life becomes beautiful. So that I, even in the face of all the ailments or pain or discomforts or misery or tragedy or all these things that none of us are hoping on each other, even in the face of all those things, can engulf my life as being a beautiful experience by taking more and more on that I am the reason or I am the cause of so much that I otherwise default to happening to me. Like there's a way of getting that it's not happening to me at all in most cases, that it's really happening either for me or through me. And that's a whole different lifestyle, isn't it? That really leaves open a whole different capacity to appreciating life.
It is. You've just defined bodhisattva in the Sanskrit, which is a soul that comes on a mission, takes on the suffering of others, enters the world with love and compassion, and then carries on their life. And everything you've just described is, I think, the blessing and the curse of anyone who chooses to be born, which is we do have challenges. No one has a great, perfect life, no matter what television tells us. So we all have difficulties. We all have problems, illnesses, death, disability. That's life. That's what life is about. But whether we succumb to it or rise to the occasion and even go above it, meaning share our disability, share the lessons we learn from an injury or a trauma or a setback with others so they can learn, and we learn collectively and the world becomes a better place. That's the kind of world I want to live in.
Yes. And this is interesting. You use the word want there. That's the kind of world you want to live in there. And again, we're talking about that word want, or we're talking about the word desire, or we're talking about, what direction do I wish for myself? Wish, want, desire, these kinds of things that I somehow can be drawn forward by my wish, wants, and desires into a direction of a worthy life. And once I take on that, I actually have something to say how that goes, instead of being at the luck of the Irish or the next toss of the Dutch. There's a whole different opportunity available to me when I am willing to take on that my DNA and my biology is not running the show, that in fact, those are tools that are being utilized by my soul, making choices and decisions about the direction my life wants to go.
Absolutely. I had a few years ago, I had a chance to lecture with the Dalai Lama in New Delhi. And he and I had a conversation on stage together. And I actually asked him a question about what was a great challenge for him. What was his greatest challenge as a child growing up? And he thought about it, and he said, I would look out the window and I would see all of my friends playing and thinking they were having a very good time. And meanwhile, my very demanding tutor was insisting that I memorize sutra after sutra for hours and hours on end. I hated it.
Yeah.
and everybody just kind of looked surprised and laughed. He said, of course I hated it. He said, but I hated it until I realized it was part of my life path. And then I accepted it and I moved on. So again, it's a matter not of changing what happens or getting revenge or feeling disgruntled. You accept what is. Literally, you accept what is.
Welcome to humanity.
Exactly. You in the first step you take, you accept what is. The second step is to move on, literally, from whatever the challenge is, be it mental, physical, or spiritual.
I love that. There's really a two-step process, isn't there? That's all it really is. It's a two-step process. Accept what is, number one. Number two, move on. That's it.
that's a good summary. Yeah, yeah.
I think we have the title. I think we have the title of this particular podcast figured out. It's very, very, very beautiful. And, there is something about your groundedness and your steadiness. And in fact, we can almost see the waveforms of you being on the ocean in your sailboat. Like the idea here that who you are is a function of that lifestyle that has been part of your life path given to you at the earliest ages of 5 years old. You're out there in a yacht, or you're out there in a sailboat actually getting this stuff done, and then you get to live all over the world on the water, which is something about the natural beauty. Just the other day I was at Stinson Beach, and actually I was in Point Reyes, which you're even more familiar with, for sure. And all the things that have happened at that point. I went to the lighthouse in Point Reyes 2 days ago. And so, being down there and really seeing them, and the waves there this weekend, I don't know if you know, were record levels, like the highest they had ever been ever.
Yes.
And so we were there to watch the waves crashing against the rocks at Point Reyes, which has damaged a fair amount of sailboats for sure.
Yes.
And there was something about the vast nature of the violence and beauty that existed simultaneously at Point Reyes and then again at Stinson Beach and down that whole path that had me be of deep honor for what nature has to offer us inside of not only observing, but realizing that I am not an outsider here. I am working together with nature to create what's here. That I'm not just a tender of the garden. I am in the garden.
Yes.
Yeah, I am the garden.
Yes. Yeah. If you take sailing, not to overdo the metaphor, but you're always dealing with forces greater than yourself. Every force that you're dealing with, the wind, the ocean, the currents, the upwellings, the tides, they're all beyond human capacity. And you don't control them ever. But you have to respect them, and you have to learn how to live in balance and harmony with them. That's the trick. How do you balance the wind and the sails and the currents and the upwellings and the tides? That's where the trick. So that's one lesson you learn very, very quickly. Secondly, you learn about the necessity of having a bearing or a life direction. So if you leave from, say, San Francisco and you're headed to Hawaii, there is one particular heading on a compass that'll get you there. There are 359 wrong directions you can go in. So you better chart your course, know where you're going, or else you're going to end up in the middle of the Pacific Ocean lost instead of in Hawaii in a paradise. So that's another thing you learn. And the third is simplicity. When you're on a sailboat for periods of time, you've got to skinny down to absolute necessities in terms of clothing, in terms of food, survival gear, etc. So it teaches you can have a good life living very, very simply. So when I return home after a period of sailing, I look around my house and I think, why do I need this? And I really don't. I have it, but it's nice. But I realize I don't need it. And it's not who I am, and I could do without it. Mm-hmm. And so those are just these little lessons that you learn sort of invisibly when you're on the water. And then, of course, when you're encountering animals that are adapted to an environment that would kill most of us, whales, dolphins, orcas, you really come to respect the fact that an animal is intact and complete. What they have is what they are. An orca is a complete intact being. Everything, it doesn't have a house, doesn't have, garbage to take out or television to watch. It just is. And so every large marine mammal to me says, I am who I am. Mm-hmm. And there are lessons that you learn every time you encounter one of them that are profound.
Fantastic. So we are reaching the end of our scheduled conversation, and my goodness, I sure hope that we have many more of these. I have the next question for you. I think this is a good space to ask you to share one of the tales that you have with one of these ridiculously large and gorgeous, all inclusive orcas, whales, dolphins, whatever's here. Maybe not one of the creatures, but what is the tallest tale that you can tell that is in your true experience out there in the Marines, in the Marines or out there in the waterway that
Oh,
I want to share with us? Maybe there's a lesson embedded in it.
there are so many, but two quick ones come to mind.
Sure.
Santo Domingo is you can leave from Santo Domingo and you go out to about 200 miles east into the Atlantic Ocean, and there's a thing called the Atlantic Shelf, and it comes from miles deep to a few hundred feet deep, and it's called the nursery. It's where humpbacks give birth, and so you can go there. Very limited access, highly controlled and regulated. But at certain times of the year, you can go and swim with the humpback whales and their baby, the calves. And so I was there maybe a year or two ago, and it was a guide. You have to go with a guide, and he always emphasized keeping the small group. There are 5 of us that went with a guide. Keep the group together, keep it tight. All of a sudden, I saw him taking off, and I thought, where is he going? And so I took off after him because I didn't know what he was seeing. And all of a sudden, he had caught up with him, and he looked down. There were 2 male humpback whales, probably 25 or 30 feet below us. We were right above their bodies. I could feel the undulations from them passing through the water. And they were singing. Wow. They were singing. And the intensity, the vibration was that you felt it. It was like being near a bass drum or a lead guitar. I mean, every breath, every note that they were singing, communicating with each other. And he said it was very unusual to see 2 male humpbacks together doing that. And we tracked them. Maybe it's only about a 10-minute. They're so fast. It's about 10 minutes. We just stayed right with them. That was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And wow. The other that just popped to mind was years ago with the Wild Dolphin Project. We were diving. You just snorkel on a Wild Dolphin Project. It's not scuba. And I was coming on board the boat, stepping up onto the transom, and the woman who heads the project looked at me and went like this and like that, go back down. And I thought, what's going on? And I looked down in the water. There was a female dolphin whose head was just above the water. And she kept motioning me to go down. So I dropped back into the water. And when I did, next to the large female dolphin was a baby dolphin. And it was like the mother was saying to the baby dolphin, see, that's a human being. They don't swim very well. They're kind of awkward, but that's what a human is like. And 2 of them just looking at me was like, you knew that this was an incredibly intelligent, intellectually superior in many ways, certainly better adapted to the aquatic environment than I am, that there was this undoubted intelligence that was immediately communicated just in the look of the baby and the female dolphin. So those 2 things come to mind. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, those are 2 great tales, and it really just shows that you probably had a choice of hundreds that you could vastly list off, or maybe even more. And just an opportunity to share with our listeners the life that you've had and the learnings that you've had, and who you are now as a teacher and a contributor and just a fellow human being making their way through life, and really seeing that we have even more access to what it means to be healthy and ill, and how to be ill in a healthy way is even available. Ken, is there anything else you want to just share with our listeners? Maybe a gem or a nugget that before we sign off entirely, that comes from who you are at UCSF or at Stanford, or just being, Ken Pelletier. What comes to mind if you wanted every human to know one thing? What might that be that maybe we don't know naturally?
Well, it's the importance of a sense of purpose. A sense of purpose.
So interesting, Ken. That's exactly what this last conversation before ours was all about.
Really?
Oh.
In a word, if there's one thing I would grasp onto, it's purpose and choice. And that, those are critical variables in our lives.
Fantastic. Love it. Super great, Ken. Ken, how do people find you, and where can they find you? And if they want to hang on or learn from you or get your books or get some of your YouTubes or what it is that you've been loading on people, how can they get access to you?
It's a website, drpelletier.com, and there are articles and videos, books, etc. at that website. Is just doctor and then my last name, Pelletier.com. So
All
it's
right.
easy. It's easy.
Fantastic. Really, really great. What a great conversation. Thanks for making it happen, Ken. Thanks for waiting for me today. And thanks for being exactly who you are. Massive contribution to humanity. Beautiful. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
You're welcome. Bye for now. Thanks you. Everyone else, we'll catch you on the flip side. Take care.